Alright. It's...
Are you going to start from case or POCs? Case.
Case statement and then POCs.
Right.
May 16th, 2019. Our first round. Alright. So, case statement is as follows. You are Superman, and you just turned 18. And we picked 18 just because it's usually the arbitrary age that society decides that you are an adult and therefore are responsible for your own life, etc., etc. The question is very simple that we're going to give to you today. You have one of two options of choice. Do you become a United States citizen without the option of opting out of the social contract? So what we mean by that is that you will become a U.S. citizen, you would be granted full United States citizens' rights, and we're going to caveat that there's going to be some sort of magical protection over you. That if you did want to actually break a law and therefore break the social contract, you would magically be able to be caught. You wouldn't be able to just break away and run away from the police. If they put you in jail, you wouldn't just be able to break out of prison. You would actually have to serve a sentence if it was given to you. That is the first option that we're going to give to you. And then the second option is pretty much the opposite. You are not a citizen of the United States, and you can do anything that you'd like to do in this world. We're going to do a couple caveats. The first one is that the situation, whichever one you pick, that's going to be your situation forever. There's no changing your mind 10, 20, 100, 1,000 years down the line. There's no kryptonite available anywhere, so we don't have to worry about mortality from evil villains. There is not a thing on Earth that we know that can hurt you. You are immortal, and all of your powers still apply. If you're looking at this round, Aaron, that does not include time travel, so we're not going to be talking about that. And then your loved ones, Louis Lane, and all those people are still alive. So we're going to ask, op choice, which one would you like to do?
Yeah, so social contracts, that's just defined as like the government is obligated to care for you in some way if you surrender your rights to them. How is that defined?
Just think about it the way that you interact with the United States government. You are a United States citizen. If someone comes and steals your property, you'd be able to go to the police and say, I have a right to have my property not be stolen. Or if you want to, exercise your freedom of speech and someone punched you in the face for it, you'd be able to exercise your right to communicate that to the government, and the government would respond as they would. We're not going to caveat that the government is going to take care of you perfectly every time, because if we could, we would probably start with minorities. And given that we can't, we're not going to do that in this case. You are a white, buff dude who has superpowers.
We're set at this time now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me talk to my partner.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Do you have any political views I should know about?
No. Through canon, we're not really going to look at canon. There's not going to be any Superman spec that's going to come up, but nothing ever known about being super pro anything. You're pro-life usually. You're fighting evil dudes. That's your main priority. You did grow up in Kansas. If you want to make an argument about getting Midwestern people, you go ahead and do that.
And if you choose not to be a citizen, you're not expected to be bound by the American laws, right?
There is no magical caveats that prevent you from doing anything.
Okay.
You can do anything.
But you could still work with the government if you wanted
to. You can do anything. What other people do in reaction to you, that would be the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to say you don't become a citizen.
You don't want to become a citizen?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you all ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The first point that we're going to talk about is morality. And under this, we want to talk about what fallibility means. Because we think that you are superhuman in the physical sense. However, you're not superhuman in intelligence. Your brain is no different from anyone else's. And you understand everything in the world from the lenses of a human being. Given this, you are susceptible to temptations just like any other human being is. You are enticed by many benefits that come from unlimited power. So, what do we call people that have unlimited power and cannot be checked by society? Usually we call those people dictators. Everything about your upbringing tells you that a dictatorship is probably bad, and that the will of the public is necessary, and that men specifically are fallible. You don't have the will of the people, since the world didn't opt into a Superman and there is not a Superman vote, and people cannot interact with you in any organizational manner to interfere in the way that you interfere, perhaps in the way that their countries, their communities handle things. We don't even allow the United States of America to be the world policeman, even though the United States of America takes the opinions of millions of people who vote every year on how policy gets made with the help of experts. Therefore, we think that the concept of giving the 18-year-old the keys to the world domination is irresponsible and dangerous, because he's no different than any other human beings when it comes to how to figure out solutions and how to figure out the world's problems. Secondly, under morality, we have the social contract. We think morality does not exist within the intrinsic values of man. One is not born with the knowledge that stealing and lying is bad, but rather the construct of society, which is made up of human beings, is what decides what is good and bad. Without a society to live in, the only morality that you can opt into is the natural world, in which the only rule is that the strongest species survives. Additionally, morality is only valuable as so long as people follow it and are incentivized to follow it, either through force or through norms. We think as Superman, the only way that you can understand what is good and bad is if you understand the consequences of your actions. The example here is if I steal something from Emmanuel and I'm punished for it, it signifies that society came together and deemed that behavior unacceptable and morally unacceptable. However, if you're able to steal from anyone and there is no punishment other than people just saying that the action is bad, following morality becomes an idea that you can debate in your head rather than the way that you should live your life and how you should allow others to live their lives as well. By ignoring the social contract and deciding that you can make better moral decisions than a democratic society, you are demeaning the importance of social conduct and therefore stating that human beings are beneath you as a species. Third, under morality, we've had nihilism. We think that the feeling of nihilism, which is a sensation of meaninglessness, or the question of who we are and what are we doing, why are we here, exists to any self-reflecting individual in the world. We think that nihilism is a form of grief, recognizing that you can't understand the world or all of the answers. We think this grief manifests usually in these steps. First of all, it's denial, that you think that you can correct human beings with your superpowers, let's say with a certain problem that exists in the world, and make a utopia. That is denial, because it has never worked in history. Then there's anger, once you realize that people are fundamentally flawed, and you lash out in frustration. The bargaining comes when you rationalize that, you know what, maybe some people are good and other people just cannot be good. Maybe because based on their religion, their race, where they are in the world, where they are in regards of wealth, and maybe that there's hopelessness once you realize that nothing that you do works either, and you give up on trying to help humans at all. And finally, the worst part of nihilism, the acceptance that people are flawed, that you can come together and you can come to a solution together. But that's after all of the initial steps of destruction that comes upon that realization. We think that nihilism is bad usually with people, but when you're dealing with someone who's going to live forever and has unlimited power, the lashing out of what it means to be dealing with the world and the questions of the world become dangerous when there's no barriers, no walls, no defense mechanisms against how Superman reacts to not being able to change the world and change humanity and the history of it. The second point we're going to talk about is the efficacy, specifically the efficacy that we get on side government as a United States hero. Because we think if you opt into the social contract, you will be beloved as a hero by Americans, especially since they saw that you chose to be equal to them instead of being above them. You become the ultimate bully pulpit, in which your voice can be used to make persuasive and logical arguments that people listen to towards the causes that you actually care about and the things that side opposition is going to want to change on their side of the house through brute force. We think you can use your voice to encourage changes within the United States if you think the U.S. government needs to be fixed to be more fair, or international changes. You can even become an elected member yourself and do it yourself. We think also international operations become a lot easier to approach. We think human rights missions become affordable and quick. which are often the only reasons that prevent us from getting involved in situations like genocide, right? With the help of Superman and the United States, they can do that efficaciously and remove the casualties that would come from it. We think the deterrence of both conventional wars and nuclear wars, either accidental or by irrational actors, becomes effective again through using Superman as an ally of the United States military. We think the war on terrorism becomes easier because you're the ultimate drone. We think you reduce the amount of unnecessary deaths by U.S. soldiers, and we think they reduce the amount of money needed for the military because the Superman is having the bulk of these operations done on him. So take all that money, use the multiplier effect, all of that money goes back into society towards projects that we would care about in society. And again, all the stuff that they're going to talk about that they want to fix, we're able to achieve that too, but by working together with a legitimate organization or a legitimate entity rather than trying to force it all upon ourselves. We think working within the democracy allows you to care for your community, which will give you love and support, while also having the ability to help others around the world. The last thing we want to talk about is the efficacy that they're going to have as a world policeman. Because we think that they're in a terrible double bind, and they must pick one advocacy that they're going to take in interacting with the world. You either respect the sovereignty of countries, which means you respect the voice of individuals that create those governments, which we think this means that you only act when the whole world agrees that you should. We think, first of all, the UN Security Council is going to say, don't act, because they don't often act because there's so many even checks on them, which is good, because force ought to be the last resort that you use when trying to deal with a conflict. We think those countries, though, are only given that power to act because if they are corrupt with their power, there can be consequences upon the corruption of that power. Up has to be okay with either being passive and never doing anything that helps the world, while warranting why the world would give Superman this authority. They need to tell us why China, Russia, the United States, Europe, Africa, and Latin America would come together and say, yeah, you can break the international laws that we all agreed upon. That's the other side of double bind. If they don't, and you don't respect sovereignty, you do whatever you want, you destroy world order, you don't care about borders or international wars, within countries distrust you and paint you as the big evil. No country allows you to call their land their land home. You set the precedent that it's okay to arbitrarily break international laws and norms. You set that precedent for both countries and non-state actors. And if you are active, because legitimacy is given to countries and not individuals, you will destroy any kind of world order that hasn't been built and will go back to no organizations of states. So even if you're doing quote-unquote good, you're doing it at the destruction of justice. We're proud to propose. Hear, hear. Oh, not that. Gosh. You know where I went?
Ready? The first point we want to talk about is morality. So they think that it's super significant that you opt into this social contract for a number of reasons. First, I don't think they've warranted out why you should opt into the social contract specifically, right? That they need to do a lot more legwork there. But first, we just understand that if you do think that there is any sort of objective morality or standard that all people should be bound by, the problem with this argument and efficacy is that in every situation, you must default into this single most utile choice, single most efficacious or most moral decision. But this removes your ability to act as a person. It removes your personhood because it forces you to not access the decisions and perspectives you otherwise would take and just default to a standard that has been applied and been enforced onto you. This is why we think morality is actually an oppressive social construct that is used to control people rather than actually accessing their humanity or their individuality. And I think this is super significant for you as an actor, just understanding that if you're not able to act freely, if you are bound by a social construct or the United States government or whatever it is, then you're not really an individual. You are part of a greater, broader society, and we don't think you have any obligation to do this for two reasons. First, you literally are not a human, you're not an American citizen, there's no reason that you have to opt into the United States government specifically. You can, on our side of the house, you can choose the way that you want to relate to the United States government. You have this huge amount of coercive power. You can fly, you can shoot lasers out of your eyes, right? If you want to have a passport, they'll give you a passport. There's no actual, pragmatic reason to opt into it. They only talk about more reasons. We think these more reasons are insufficient because we actually think morality is a spectrum. It is not just a law or a standard. That is the problem with morality. We'll never, if you say that there's an objective truth and objective morality, there's never never a spectrum that is recognized. I think morality is oppressive because it always forces people to default to a standard that is deemed quote-unquote moral without understanding the nuances of why they would make the decision. Yes?
How are you building your moral code that you're going to follow in determining what is the right or wrong operation?
Totally based on intuition, right? We think intuition, insofar as it is something that all individuals have, you as Superman have, we think it is a standard you ought to fall to. We think this is for two reasons. First, it recognizes you as an individual. It says that your own intuition and personal values are significant and should or can't be acted upon. But then secondly, we think it is the most pragmatic and practical for you as an individual, because then you're able to access the things you want to access, right? It's like the same reason, like, you live in an apartment, like you want to have a certain amount of freedom, and we think if you can have more freedom, this is preferable to having less freedom. The second argument I want to advance is that on our side of the house, you can better help people. We think on their side of the house, and we think you can better help people, and beyond this, you can better just access your humanity. I'm going to talk about this for two reasons. First, the government, when you opt in as a citizen, you're just a lot more likely to be misused, right? The government understands that they can use you as a drone, so they're going to use you as a drone if they're able to do that. I think this is problematic for two reasons. First, the United States government is extremely immoral, right? The government literally advocates, send troops into Iraq, killed millions of people there, or hundreds of thousands of people. We frequently on a regular basis do things that we shouldn't be doing as a government. And insofar as this is true, I don't think that you have any moral obligation to align with these ideals. Government may tell you, well, at least this standard is most accessible to the most number of people. However, we already told you that even if it is more accessible, it is still oppressive. Secondly, the reason this is problematic is because you personally as an individual should not be forced to be involved or align yourself with something that you think is fundamentally moral, because again, this violates your autonomy. The second argument I want to talk about is if the United States government could do good, they would be doing it already, right? They need you to be outside of their citizenship and outside of the law, because this will allow them to better use you, right? So say, I think we both by this standard, you want to help people. We think quite simply in our side of the house, you can better help people when you're not aligned with the United States government for three reasons. First, you're not politicized, you're not attached to any political party or the executive branch or whatever. So then for when Trump gets elected or whatever, and he tells you to go into a mission and I don't know, North Korea or something, no one's going to be mad at you because you're not forced to align with things like this. Secondly, we think that it's more beneficial because now you're more clandestine and you're not as publicly seen. I think this just frees you up to make more decisions. And then finally, you're better able to protect your identity, etc. I think that's really significant. I'm going to move one case and address these arguments. So the first point about morality, that you're a dictator is essentially if you exercise your form of justice. We think it's being much more of a dictator to assert that there is any objective morality, because this forces people to opt into that form of morality whether or not they want to. It presupposes that you have a moral high ground in order to determine what decisions should be made. This is problematic because really, the facts that humanity exists at all is completely random. We think there's no reason there should be any moral system or any objective truth. And if there's no objective truth, then there's no reason to have morality. They might say for pragmatic reasons, but honestly, if you choose to opt out of morality as a single actor, the pragmatic harms are not going to outweigh on any moral level, right? It's just one person. So I don't think that's a significant argument. But then secondly, understand the social contract, which is what they think you should opt into, literally sucks. It's terrible, right? The United States government doesn't honor its obligations to the social contract. We see systemic inequality. We see people being deprived access to education. We see homeless people starving on the streets. We see people not being able to access healthcare. There are so many reasons the social contract is not sufficient. And yes, we think that insofar as it is not sufficient, we don't think that you have an obligation to align yourself with it. A government says, they tell you that, well, it's the best we can do, but I think it might be the best you can do for everyone else, but it doesn't have to be for you as an actor. We don't think that you as a person who can literally came from another planet, should signal to the rest of the world that the United States government is so holy and just that you should align yourself with it. I think you eschew yourself from that and you allow your personal image to not be tarnished. I think this is an independent RT. This is on our side of the house. You can independently determine, I'll get you if I have time, you can determine how you will be related to by posterity, right? You can decide whether or not you'll do I'll get you if I have time. You can form your image completely and totally without the United States government actually intervening. On their side of the house, you align yourself with the United States government, and if in the future the U.S. is seen as some immoral actor, which it probably will be, then your image is tarnished and you look like a terrible person. What does this do for your nihilism, which is the next point they talk about in morality? I think it just means that A, you don't have any legacy that you can meaningfully care about, but then secondly, you're not able to help people as effectively as you would want to otherwise. Then they say, signal that you are just as human as everyone else. 1, you're from another planet. You're not just as human as everyone else. 2, morality is oppressive. You don't have to join their form of morality in order to prove that you're equals, right? 3, I think you're a better hero if you show you're not equals. You're you can fly, you can shoot lasers, you're saving people on the planet. I think this is a much more powerful message. They need to do more legwork on debating this. The second independent point about efficacy, I want to address this. Understand, they say that essentially you're going to be able to work with the government, you're going to be able to do human rights missions, and there's going to be less death, etc., because fewer troops will be needed. 1, we don't think that you should make it easier for the United States government to do military actions in other countries. There's never been a time in which the United States has stepped in and actually made things better off, so we don't think that you should align yourself with the government. But then secondly, we don't think you have any obligation to do so, insofar as it is true that you're putting yourself at risk or making a sacrifice of your own personal time, and all of these don't allow you to access freedom in the same way. But then you have all the harms that we told you about off case, which is that you're not politicized, you're now aligned with people like Donald Trump, and now your coercive power that you previously had to actually make change is lessened. But then I think an additional line of argumentation that I just want to address is that what if the United States becomes corrupt? What if it becomes immoral in the future? I think this is something that just hasn't been addressed but they just assume that the United States will always be a good actor, or is already pretty much a good actor. But insofar as it is true on our side of the house that we just disalign ourselves from the United States, we allow ourselves to correct and check against the United States to make sure that it actually does stay moral. I think this outweighs because the United States is a world power. I think this is massively important long term. For all these reasons, it's with pride that we oppose.
Oh. Here you go. Ready?
Yeah.
We want to start out with 2 overviews. The first thing we want to talk about is morality, because I think whenever we're talking about in this round so far about how we're going to apply morality, in what circumstances, how we're building it, we got to remember this isn't a question for today, tomorrow, or as we said 10 years from now. What side opposition has to deal with is that we're dealing with a question of morality ad infinitum. What that means is that you're probably going to live forever, or you're going to see a lot of changes happen in society. So what we want to ask ourselves is, who checks that morality better? If we can agree that 10 years ago we were less well-rounded moral beings. What that means, in the last 10 years, we grew, we understood, we saw what was the good, we saw what people didn't like and what they did like, we saw what was justice and what wasn't justice. In the last 10 years, we've adjusted the way that we view the world, we view ourselves, and we view the others. They can't do that. We outlined in PMC that the only way to actually make that change in that mechanism is to actually have something that stops your intuitions. We flat out asked them how they build their moral code, and they said they follow their intuitions. So what happens if an intuition is objectively incorrect in the moral sense, but nothing happens as a consequence because of it? They never learn, they never grow on their side of the house when that happens, unless something really, really bad happens to them, in which case that is really bad on their side, because the amount of destruction that needs to happen to your psyche in order to change is much higher. On our side of the house is an immediate norm that you have to follow every single day. And it might sound boring, it might sound less sexy than lasers, but we think understanding human beings, social constructs, and what it means to live in a community, to be an alien, but at the same time to understand that you live with these people and you need to care for them and need to care for their home today, tomorrow, and forever. That is the only way to create a moral code that exists throughout time. They never give you an answer about how they're going to keep themselves sane throughout infinity. Their first point to talk about morality, and they say, why should you opt into the social contract? Again, remember, what we're saying is that we would rather bring millions of people together and create an idea of what norms and what morality should be through the ideas, debates, and discussions of everyone in the most liberal democracy that we have seen. And I I agree the United States is not the best one, but they have to make an argument why an 18-year-old would be better than that collective knowledge of people through history that they have come together with experts when it comes to the question of what is good and what is bad. That is the first answer on the social contract. The second question is that they have to opt into some sort of organization and system. Again, they can't just say they're going to do things when things are bad, and they're not going to do bad things when they should be doing good things. That is a generic statement about what they hope to do in the future. They need to give you a pathway that is dependent on consequences, and if not consequences, an ability to have to do something every single day without those consequences. We think the only way that humans are able to interact with morality is through consequences in some capacity, because that is the only difference between human beings and animals. Now again, we understood that if they do not want to partake in the way that human beings construct society, maybe they do want to do it through the natural order. Remember, natural order is the strongest survives. We don't think the strongest survive is the way that we want to rule the world, because again, we think that guarantees that you're going to be a dictator. But thirdly is the intelligence collection. Let's say that they wanted to fix the Israeli-Palestinian issue. How? Who are they going to get? Even if they grabbed the 100 brightest minds when it comes to this subject, brought them in the room, forced them to write 1,000 pages on the question, and you, an 18-year-old that doesn't know anything about this issue, sits down and reads through it all, we told you, you don't have a super intelligent brain, so it's not like you have the super ultra answer. But again, let's say that you did. Let's say that you are somehow a more moral intellectual being than everyone else. We told you it doesn't matter, because you need to be able to convince people to live in a particular way. And if the only way they get to do it, as repeated throughout the op speech, is through lasers, is through brute force, is through their human super nature, even if you have the right answer, people are not going to follow the right answer, and instead they're going to view you as evil, because you're not going to them with ideas, you're not going to them with communication, you're not going to them with better organizational structures about how to live in society for what is better and what is just. You're going with what you think is better. We don't think that's going to sell very well. They say morality is suppressive and it stops your actions. We think some of your actions should be stopped from having. Whenever they make a mistake, by the way, they have to live with the conscience of that for decades to come. Even if they make a mistake within the society of the United States, again, we said that is the collective action of everyone. When they say, well, but what happens if you can't help people? We told you the only reason why we don't allow the United States military to freely go and help people across the world is because it is too expensive, it is hard to do, and it might cost American lives. We said that the Superman takes care of all of that. If you can buy that they can do that with Superman without the military help, we definitely can do that with the military help, but we get the advantages of having cooperation with other countries, with other governments, other intelligence agencies, our own intelligence agencies. So we have advocacy to act in situations that are dire. Even if they say they're free to act in situations that are dire, they don't have the answer or the organization to actually take care of people on the ground. They say you can choose how you're going to interact. It is not how you're going to interact, but if people trust that you're interacting for the very right reasons. We told you during the POI, they talked about intuition. Again, your intuition is the same as human beings because you've been raised by human beings. So if they want to talk about how they're going to make better decisions than human beings, they have to, again, even if intuition is the right answer, it cannot be the right answer if it's the same intuition that other human beings that are probably smarter than you at this point have. Again, remember, you are young, you're going to make bad decisions right now. They say you're going to be pragmatic for you. We think a pragmatic life, that's another, by the way, independent RFD. Like, your whole family and community is going to abandon you. Like, you're not going to be welcomed in any state country because you're going to be an international terrorist because you say, I don't care about organization. Remember, they never answered the third point on case. What happens when the United Nations come together and make a collective statement of Superman, these are your restrictions, this is what you can do, and this is what you cannot do. And what happens when they break those distinctions? We say at that point, you become the enemy of anyone because you can break anyone's borders and everyone's sovereignty. So you don't have a home, you don't have a life, you don't have a family, you don't have a community. What do you live for? What brings you happiness? What brings you purpose? Remember nihilism? We talked about nihilism. Nihilism gets a lot worse when you're not able to answer those questions. Even if they save the world, we ask, save the world For who? If you don't have anyone around you, why would you care? There's a reason why people start as heroes and they become villains, because they stop having an answer to that question, and it only becomes about power at the end. They say they can force you to be a drone. They would have to conscript you individually, but we told you, you have constitutional rights. In the same way, they could just say, Aaron, we're going to draft you individually. You'd be put away. But remember, we told you, at the point where you say, I am the same as United States citizens, people will love you. You become a bully pulpit. So you can change all of those bad policies that they're talking about. You know who doesn't get elected? Is Superman is telling people he's a white supremacist and he shouldn't be elected? Donald Trump. We get to do that because we are an American. When they say that, Donald Trump gets to tell people the international terrorist doesn't want you to elect me. Therefore, that's exactly why you should elect me. You entrench all of those ideas about aliens being this dangerous thing, specifically when you again tell them, hey, I have lasers and I can do whatever I want. On the arm case, mainly it's a third point that they have to answer, because all of their pragmatics are driven through the ability of working in trust with people. If no country, no government, no community, no sets of people can trust that they can deal with you in a non-violent way, that you can respect their decisions, even if you think that they are wrong, you don't get any advocacy at the end of this round. We're proud to propose.
We agree with their first point that morality is ad infinitum. Right? We think this is clearly a standard. I think we've simply said that our system of morality is better than consenting into theirs. Their response is, what if your intuition is wrong? What if you make a mistake and you are immoral? Essentially, if you are not bound by some standard that everyone is held to, then every action you take will be immoral. However, we've said that the very fact that this standard exists in the first place is in itself oppressive. It is wrong to say that you must consent or make decisions within a specific moral framework, because morality is a spectrum. There is humanity is valuable, autonomy is valuable. This is what distinguishes our humanity. And insofar as it is true that humanity is valuable and there is autonomy, then you must also buy that morality is a spectrum. That some people, if you look at morality 1 to 10, want to follow morality on a scale of 10, and other people want to have it on a 5. The problem with Gov's advocacy is they don't take in this nuance. They simply say everyone must consent into the 10. And insofar as this is true, even though they are arguing with the words morality, we are saying the facts that objective morality is an ideal in their side of the house. They should be dropped because this is immoral, this is oppressive. But even beyond this, on a very more theoretical standard, they missed it. The argument of this kind of cuts both ways, right? Understand that on both sides, on our side of the house, we're going to make some mistakes. There's going to be collateral damage. On their side of the house, the government is going to make them make mistakes. The government is going to tell them they cannot intervene in certain cases, and it's going to force them to intervene in other cases. Their side of the house, their personal satisfaction, which we think is actually probably most important in this round, is insofar as this is an actor case, I think. And insofar as it is true that you are valuable as an individual and you ought to maximize your own preferences, I think that on their side of the house is worse, because then the mistakes all fall on the United States government. It's not going to be, it's like the United States is like this bully that's forcing you to take actions that you want and not take others. Why is this harmful? Because we as human beings or as individuals regret inaction more than we regret action. We do some collateral damage on our side of the house. This is preferable and we will bite this harm, but we do not want to have the side in which you want to step in and you want to intervene in the Rwandan genocide, but you can't intervene because the UN won't call it a genocide, right? We don't want this because then you know that you were responsible for that genocide, and the reason you did it was because of your high horse ideals that for some reason morality is objective. This hasn't been warranted. They haven't proven God exists. They didn't address the point that we said that it's totally random that you exist at all, and insofar as this is true, they've only gone for pragmatic benefits of why necessarily you should opt into this moral system, but we get better pragmatics because on our side of the house, we can intervene whenever we want to. But then, I guess, to address this argument, they say, what if your intuition is wrong? What if you are immoral? This doesn't win because if we believe that it is good, if we believe that our intuition is correct, then we ought to default to it. This is our entire point about the facts that morality is a spectrum. I think this is extremely significant. But then the second reason this isn't a significant argument, it doesn't outweigh the facts. And on our side, I'll get you at the end of this point. On our side of the house, we can check against the United States government. We can check against this system that we believe is immoral, that we can literally point to tangible instances and examples of why the United States is immoral on many levels. And on our side of the house, we allow ourselves to check against it, not through a political process of voting, but literally being able to say, yes, if you're going to go and commit human rights abuses in the future, we will literally take laser beams and cut your army down. We will not let you do this. And we are okay with making this decision because necessarily as an actor, we believe that we are good. Why do we think that we are good as an actor? Well, most people tend to think they're above average, right? I think I'm probably more attractive than most people. I think I'm most intelligent than most people. But everyone thinks this. We all think we're good actors. So when they cast doubt on the idea that you might be wrong, there's no reason for you to believe this because what do you have to compare it to? You have no objective truth to compare it to because objective truth is a spectrum, and you're probably a better actor. Look at your track record. You've saved the world on numerous occasions. Your collateral damage has been a few buildings. The United States government has destroyed countries. They have created depressions. They have started civil wars. I think this is much worse. The final point, I will get you then in this argument, the final point is the United States system isn't even a system you should align yourself with because it is immoral. We told you that the United States is a capitalist system, and we think even if we wanted to, we would be more willing to be adversarial to the United States than to align ourselves with it. There's a number of reasons for this. It's a capitalist system. Therefore, it's necessarily and fundamentally going to stratify levels of society along race, gender lines, economic lines, all of these lines. This is negative because if you align yourself with a system who stratifies people and relegates them to a caste system, your personal satisfaction and feelings are worse because you are partially responsible for supporting the United States directly. Yes, I'll get your point.
What actually will give you everyday happiness? What will give you fulfillment as an individual?
Everyday fulfillment will be defining morality for yourself. 1, 2, accessing freedom. And we think you only do that in our state of the house, and helping people. We think ultimately all of these things must necessarily come down to your perspective, right? Side government looks at this from an outside actor and they say, well, what if everyone else thinks that you're making mistakes? What if you're destroying the world and you don't know it? If you don't know that you're actually making mistakes, then we really don't care. Our goal is to maximize what we think is most important, and you can never do that on their side of the house because the government will always be using you. I want to address this argument about solving problems because we really did address this PMC point where they told you that they talk about intelligence and brains. Even if you get a bunch of people to write papers, you won't have the information to actually act. We told you that the government, insofar as it is true that you're a superhero, whether or not you choose to become an American citizen, the United States government has a massive incentive to work with you, right? For all of the reasons that they tell you. However, the interesting thing, so this is non-unique on either side. We'll get to work with the United States government if we want to on both sides of the house. The interesting thing about our side of the house is 2 reasons. 1, we get to do it on our own terms. We get to negotiate and mediate with the government and make sure they're doing things that we actually that we believe are in the world's interest. This is extremely important. You think you have no obligation. Again, morality is not objective. You think you don't have an obligation to consent to their system. But then secondly, you can actually be more effective on our side of the house because since you're not an American citizen, people like the UN won't be able to pressure the United States to extradite you. They won't be able to do these things that undermine your efficacy. Because you're not politicized, you're not tied to a specific political figure. And then also, the point I told you, is that an off case? Then we told you in our third, I'm kind of jumping around, but I'll signpost. In our third input point of off case, we told you personal satisfaction is extremely important. We made this point about legacy, and on our side of the house, our legacy is made in our own image. It is not tied to the United States government. It is not contingent on actions that the government forced us to make. It is completely in our terms. And we think, insofar as it is true that you are immoral, I think this is extremely significant, and it's a benefit they don't get on their side of the house. Why is it more important than what they say about accidentally making harms for being immoral? Because this standard is something that you personally will feel, something you personally will relate to. They ask the question, well, if you're not going to listen to anyone, who are you saving the world for? What are you living for? And I think you're living for your vision and your image of what the world should be. I think this is valuable. This is something you ought to defer to. Respect sovereignty. Finally, to pin a point, I want to address the one case in a pin a point of respecting sovereignty. Yes, you probably can respect sovereignty, but there are instances in which you shouldn't respect sovereignty. You shouldn't respect sovereignty when the UN tells you don't intervene in Rwanda because it's not a genocide. You shouldn't intervene in sovereignty. You should intervene into sovereignty if global warming is killing your environment. Like, there's things that are just implicitly true, and there's a problem that the political system just can't solve certain types of problems. That's why the problems are still there. That's why they exist. Whether it's because they don't want to, whether it's because they are inequipped to, whether it's because they're being manipulated by rich people, there's all of these reasons. And on our side of the house, only we can solve these problems because only are we actually divorced from this political system. For all these reasons, it's with pride that we oppose.
I'm still going to do 5.5 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
Do 4.5. Okay. Adjudicating this round, the very first question that we have to ask ourselves is, how is this individual going to be driven? I think we're asking a lot of big questions about what is going to happen in the world, how we're going to deal with the UN, how we're going to deal with genocide, how we're going to deal with the United States military complex, and those are really big questions. But if really the intuition is the way that we're going to lead this round, it is necessary to ask yourself, how am I drawing my morals? Where am I getting my drive to do something any given day? And I think both sides actually very naturally agree that what we want is peace. We want humanity to live a good life. We want justice to happen. But the only reason why we care about that is because we care about humans. And we laid that out all throughout PMC. We told you live amongst humans. You could rule them. You could be their God. You could say what is wrong, what is right, turn your blind eye and decide that way. But what we told you happens when that is true is that you are alone. You have literally no other living being in this world that you can interact with, have conversations with, and try to see if your interaction and intuition is actually something that you can even stomach. We told you you are already raised in this world. You have parents, you have a community, you have loved ones. They can't erase this fact. So, to turn the world like that and say, I don't care about human beings and I can do this, means they're opting for the natural world. What we said every single time is that morality is never a question of the capital T truth. That doesn't exist. We told you the moral good is how we like to live amongst each other and how we like to respect our society's rules and norms every single day. And we said when they choose to not opt into any system and rather say, I will choose on any particular day, on any given occasion, given no precedence or information to act one way or the other, we told you simply the world is going to reject you. They will dehumanize you. They will say that you are their enemy, and they will be correct in doing so. And then every single point that they have on their side of the house about making the world better doesn't make sense because the world doesn't want Superman to begin with. So why would they fight for humans for the rest of their lives if humans hate them on their side of the house? They didn't talk about nihilism at all. We said when the entire world comes together and says, Superman, you are wrong. And we said in MG, even if you objectively have the right answer to the question in front of them, if they can't eat that answer, if they can't digest it, if they don't trust you, and therefore look at the truth on its face and say it's a lie because they don't trust you, they don't have any efficacy other than lasers. And if lasers are their only efficacy, they're the ones that are committing genocides and not us on our side of the house. The United States government or the individual, who is better? We already told you when you're alienated from everyone on their side of the house, you don't have a community. We told you when you tell our humans that you are part of society, you become the ultimate bully pulpit, meaning people will listen to your ideas of what is good and what is just. No answer from side opposition. We told you you can even become an elected member yourself to make all these decisions that they say are bad in their side of the house. No answer there. We said all the money that you're saving that would be spent on the military complex, now because you can do all these operations very effectively, get used back in society to help people that are downtrodden. No answer from side opposition. And we told you this is the best democracy that that humanity has seen. So So even if it's a flawed one, it is still the best one and encompasses millions and millions of people compared to one. No answer there. The only answer we get is inaction versus action. And we flagged this in the MG. They fell for the bait, and this is the answer. They give you the repetitive answer of the United States has always done bad, and why would they do bad? We identified what the problem was. It wasn't a problem of intent. The intent was to do good, but it is hard to go into a country, eliminate the opponent without any casualties. We said Superman can do this. Hell, they said Superman can do this alone. We said the United States aiding Superman by giving them information, by giving them the ability to have operational, organizational advantages is something that they don't have on their side of the house at all. So, both issues, like the same genocide, they might solve it. We definitely solve it on their side of the house, and we identified that the only reason why you wouldn't do it is because you can't do it efficaciously. We can do it efficaciously now. So the question of inaction, action doesn't actually exist. It only is who actually does it better, and we do it better. Is morality immoral? We said morality allows you to live your life with humans. That is the only way you derive happiness. They said, hey, if you don't know what's wrong, you won't care. That is not a possibility. Because once you see that people are dying as the result of your actions, or you see that people are unhappy even though you have the right answer, eventually that is going to get back to you. And again, you have to buy it. If they really just stop caring about human beings, that means that doesn't get back to you. That means you stop caring about human beings. That means you're literally an animal. Don't vote for side op if that's the case. But the last point, which was completely dropped, they said, yeah, sometimes we're just not going to listen to the UN and do whatever we want. What stops bad governments and non-state actors like terrorist organizations from saying, if Superman can do this, if he can derive this type of morality, why can't I? We laid that out in the first speech, never got a response. We're proud to propose.
The biggest lie governments ever fabricated, is that they represent the people's interests. We have seen at every point in society, the people who are worst off are routinely stolen from. They are routinely not heard. They are routinely marginalized. This is not a system we are okay with supporting. This is not a system we want to opt into. So then when they tell you all of these things about, well, what if a bad acting government says, if Superman can take these forms of power and just act unilaterally, why can't I? What will stop them? You will stop them. You are Superman. That is the point of this case. This is what we have told you. I think there are three questions in the round, and the first is morality. I think the form of morality we care most about is personhood. They tell you, you could be a god, but who would you live with, right? You would be alone. We tell you that the idea that it's wrong for people to act unilaterally was a social construct. We told you this from LOC. So therefore, when they tell you it's just wrong to act unilaterally, we think there is something valuable there when you make this statement that an individual should not respect the rules of society because societies are always oppressive. We think it's okay for there to be a free-for-all. We think it's okay for people to just act on their own interests as long as they're not infringing on the rights of other people and like harming them to a negative extent, right? And we think this is not happening on our side and in our own eyes because we're making decisions that we think are most efficacious and valuable. I think the second question in this round is personal satisfaction. I think this is actually the most important thing in the round because even if you value morality, I think insofar as it is true, we told you this through LOC, that you're one actor, your harms to the moral fabric of the universe aren't going to be that big, right? It's just about what are you signaling, what are you saying? But I think satisfaction is very important because you were living with yourself forever. You were the person who you care most about yourself because you can most deeply relate to these ideas. Why do we win personal satisfaction? Because their main advocacy here is people won't trust you. They will call for you to be removed. They'll call for you to be regulated by the government, and you will always ignore their cries. This is not a good argument for so many reasons. First, we tell you, worst case, say this happens. Say people want you to leave. Then you do everything on your own terms. So if they're calling for you to start
like not creating as much collateral damage or not stepping in a Rwandan genocide, then you can do that. It's on your terms, right? You don't have to become an American citizen to subscribe to the things that they want you to do. But we think it's important that you are able to choose whether or not you want to do this. You can never choose on their side of the house. But then, this is not a good argument because we've told you that politicians, that governments themselves are going to force you to do things that'll make people hate you even more than you personally making these decisions for yourself. On our side of the house, you can be the litmus test. If people start hating you, there's public opinion against you, you can change your perspective. On their side of the house, politicians who are paid for by rich businesses and rich companies will always force things to happen, like the Rwandan genocide being denied. They will always make it impossible for you to act, or they will send you in to do airstrikes in Iraq at a zero cost to them. Look, they save even more money, that they can give it to even more businesses. This makes you most likely to be hated. This makes you unlikely to actually access your personal satisfaction, right? We think this does not work. We think you are a lot more likely to not be trusted if you align yourself with the government. Why is this true? Because people already don't trust the government. We already think when Donald Trump says fake news that it's just a farce, that it's just a political scandal. So why, if you as Superman align yourself with the government, are people any less likely to think that you are also untrustworthy? Our side is a lot better, right? The age of the forgotten man, it's people care a lot more about being unilateral, etc. I think this happens on our side of the house. But even if it doesn't, we can still adjust to all of the harms and solve for the harms that they tell you. Then I think the next question is like, you care about people, you're on earth, you've been raised by people, so you want to help people. This is a good argument, and this is true, and it hasn't been denied on either side of the house. We just say that on our side of the house, you can create the most good in your eyes, A, because you're able to act on your own. I think this is extremely significant. But B, you can create the most good because you're able to check against an actor who is already rogue. The United States already does a lot of terrible things in the status quo, and only you can actually regulate these things. They say, like, well, now you won't be able to work the United States to get, like, information to actually solve problems. This completely ignores what we told you in MO and LOC, that we told you can still work with the government because they have massive incentives to do so. On our side of the house, pick us up because we maximize your personal satisfaction. We actually make a statement that individuality is okay, and we stand by these claims. For all these reasons, proud to oppose.
Woo! That was number one.
Yeah. That